Hey, did you know that the FBI once went to ridiculous extremes hammering trigger guards, tossing pistols like frisbees, and dumping thousands of rounds just to pick their next standard issue? Sidearm? You'd think their final choice would be the most accurate, the most reliable, or at least the most practical. But nope, somehow the gun they picked was none of the above. Back in 1987, the FBI lined up 9 different handguns and put them through some absolutely brutal tests, hoping to find the perfect duty weapon. But here's the thing, the final results weren't just about performance. Instead, the decision was heavily influenced by personal biases, outdated thinking, and what can only be described as an obsession with 45 ACP. Some of their testing methods were so bizarre, they felt more like something out of a carnival game than a serious law enforcement trial. In this video, we're going to break down how each gun performed, the weird logic behind the FBI's final decision, and why history later proved them completely wrong. So let's get into it. The winners, the losers, and the gun that actually deserved the top spot. FBI's 1987 handgun trials, the process and the flaws. All right, so let's talk about the FBI's 1987 handgun trial. Because honestly, this whole thing was a mess. The idea was solid test a bunch of pistols, find the best one, and issue it to agents nationwide. Simple, right? Well, not exactly. The FBI put 9 different handguns through a series of brutal tests. Some of them made sense like accuracy drills and endurance trials, but others were just plain weird. They literally hammered trigger guards with mallets, threw guns around like frisbees, and even disqualified one pistol for not having a decocker while letting another pistol without a decocker stay in the running. Makes perfect sense, right? And then there was the 45 ACP obsession. A lot of older agents back then were convinced that bigger bullets automatically meant better stopping power. So from the start, 9mm pistols were fighting an uphill battle, no matter how well they perform. The FBI's scoring system was all over the place, with reliability sometimes taking a back seat to personal preferences and old school thinking. But here's the kicker, the gun that actually performed the best didn't even win. Instead, the FBI's final pick was a 45 that had its fair share of reliability issues. Meanwhile, pistols like the Glock 17 and the SIG P226, which later became legendary for their durability and accuracy, were ranked lower due to some questionable logic. So in short, this wasn't just a scientific test, it was a mix of performance, bias, and some downright strange testing methods. And as history would prove, the FBI eventually realized they made the wrong call. Ruger P85, a promising start that fell apart. First up on the list is the Ruger P85, a pistol that had potential but ultimately crashed and burned in the FBI trials. On paper, it seemed like a solid contender. It was big, tough-looking, and had that built-like-a-tank reputation that Ruger is known for. But the reality? Yeah, not so great. Right from the start, the P85 struggled with reliability. Some units started failing as early as 500 rounds, and by the time they hit the 1,500-round mark, things were getting embarrassing. A department-issued duty gun has to be able to handle thousands of rounds without breaking down. And in this case, the P85 simply couldn't keep up. Beyond that, accuracy wasn't exactly its strong suit either. Compared to other pistols in the test, it just didn't deliver the precision the FBI was looking for. And then there were the ergonomics or lack thereof. Some agents found it bulky and awkward, which definitely didn't help its chances. Now, to be fair, Ruger improved the P85 in later generations, and the P-Series eventually became a decent budget-friendly option for civilian shooters. But for a high-stakes FBI contract, it just wasn't cutting it. The Bureau rightly put it at the very bottom of the list, and honestly, it deserved that spot. Would I recommend the P85 today? Not really, especially when there are so many better options out there. It's more of a collector's piece now than a serious defensive pistol. But hey, at least it paved the way for Ruger's future designs. ITM AT-84, the gun that never got a fair shot. Next up, we have the ITM AT-84, a Swiss-made CZ-75 clone that honestly never even got a fair chance in the FBI's testing. Not because it wasn't a solid pistol, but because of a clerical error and some bureaucratic nonsense. So here's what happened. Official test documents actually misidentified the manufacturer, confusing ITM, the Swiss company that made the AT-84, with IMI Israel Military Industries. Now that might not sound like a big deal, but when you're dealing with government agencies, that kind of mix-up can pretty much kill your chances before the test even begins. Then there
has
was the
flooded the
decocker
civilian
rule.
market over
The FBI required that all pistols in the trials have a decocker feature that safely lowers the hammer without firing a round. The AT-84 didn't have one, so they immediately disqualified it. Sounds fair, right? Well, here's the kicker. The Glock pistols in the test also didn't have a decocker, but they were not disqualified. That double standard alone raises a lot of questions about how seriously they were evaluating each gun. The actual performance of the AT-84, pretty solid. It was based on the legendary CZ-75 design, meaning it had great ergonomics, a smooth trigger, and reliable steel frame construction. But none of that mattered once it was labeled a rule breaker. It didn't get the same level of scrutiny as the other pistols, because according to the FBI, it was already out of the running. Honestly, this is one of those what could have been stories. If the FBI had actually tested it properly, would it have placed higher? Maybe. But thanks to a mix of paperwork errors and rigid, inconsistent rules, we'll never know. Would I recommend the AT-84 today? If you can find one, it's a great seize-dust-style pistol with a smooth shooting experience. But for the 1987 FBI trials, it was doomed before it even had a chance to prove itself. SIG P220, a 45 ACP powerhouse that fell short. The SIG P220 and 45 ACP seemed like a strong contender in the 1987 FBI handgun trials. It had a solid reputation, high-quality construction, and proven performance. However, it faced several major setbacks during testing. First, it failed the drop test, allegedly firing when dropped, an unacceptable flaw for a duty weapon. Then there were magazine issues, causing reliability problems that the FBI couldn't overlook. The heavy recoil and double-action trigger pull also made it less favorable compared to other options. One of the most unusual tests involved hammering the trigger guard with a mallet. The P220's frame showed significant damage, raising concerns about its durability. While this may not reflect real-world use, it hurt the pistol's chances in the evaluation. Despite its flaws in the FBI trials, the SIG P220 remains a legendary handgun. It's accurate, well-built, and still popular among shooters today. However, in 1987, it simply couldn't compete with the more reliable and modern alternatives. Smith & Wesson 459, a solid contender with some flaws. The Smith & Wesson 459 seemed like a solid choice in the 1987 FBI handgun trials. It had decent accuracy, manageable recoil, and a familiar double-action trigger that many agents were comfortable with. Plus, its double-stack magazine offered good capacity in an era where higher round counts were becoming more desirable. However, it wasn't without issues. During testing, at least one unit lost its rear sight, which is a major problem in any qualification course. There were also concerns about frame durability, as the alloy construction showed signs of potential cracking over long-term use. In terms of reliability, the 459 performed reasonably well, averaging around one malfunction. Every 500 rounds better than some competitors, but worse than others. Despite this, the FBI's preference for 45 ACP meant that 9mm pistols had an uphill battle in the rankings. Overall, the Smith & Wesson 459 was a decent all-around pistol, but it lacked the reliability and long-term durability that could have pushed it higher in the competition. While it served well for its time, it ultimately didn't stand out enough to secure the top spot. Glock 19, a future legend that the FBI overlooked. The Glock 19 is now one of the most respected handguns in the world. But back in 1987, the FBI didn't quite see its potential. During testing, the Glock 19 had the highest reliability, with almost no true mechanical failures. However, the FBI still downgraded its score because agents reported failures to lock back on an empty magazine. This was likely due to grip interference with the slide stop, not an actual flaw in the pistol. Another issue was the FBI's bias toward traditional double-action triggers. The Glock's consistent striker-fire trigger was unfamiliar to agents at the time, leading to accidental discharges during training. This led to negative marks despite the gun's overall solid performance. Despite these early criticisms, the Glock 19 proved itself over time. It was compact, easy to control, and incredibly reliable. While the FBI gave it mediocre scores, history shows that the Glock 19 was one of the best handguns in the test. It just took law enforcement a few more years to realize it. Smith & Wesson 645, the FBI's controversial pick. The Smith & Wesson 645 was the official winner of the FBI's 1987 handgun trials, but its victory left many people scratching their heads. Chambered in 45 ACP, it had the advantage of a larger caliber, which appealed to agents who believed in the stopping power of big bullets. However, the 645 wasn't the most reliable, the most accurate, or the most innovative pistol in the test. One of the biggest concerns was the safety lever coming loose during testing. That's not a minor issue when law enforcement relies on a sidearm for life or death situations. Additionally, the 645's reliability was inconsistent, with more malfunctions than some of its 9mm competitors. Despite these drawbacks, the FBI praised its caliber, manufacturer support, and overall durability. The 45 ACP preference heavily influenced their decision, even though the raw performance data suggested better options were available. Over time, law enforcement and military units worldwide moved away from 45 ACP in favor of high-capacity 9mm pistols. The 645 may have been the FBI's choice in 1987, but history has shown that it was far from the best pistol in the lineup. Beretta 92, a strong performer that didn't get its due. The Beretta 92 was one of the most reliable and accurate handguns in the FBI's 1987 trials, yet it didn't get the recognition it deserved. This pistol had already proven itself in the U.S. military's XM9 trials, and its performance in the FBI test was equally impressive. It fired nearly 200 rounds between stoppages, making it one of the most reliable options in the lineup. However, despite its stellar performance, the FBI deducted points for reasons that seemed more subjective than practical. One complaint was about parts availability, with concerns that sourcing components from an Italian manufacturer could be an issue. Another issue mentioned was the exposed barrel, which could supposedly burn an agent's hand, something that seems more theoretical than an actual problem in the field. The double-action trigger pull was another factor that some agents struggled with, though this was common among pistols of its type. Despite these nitpicks, the Beretta 92 performed well in the FBI's qualification course and demonstrated that it was a solid contender. Looking back, it's clear that the Beretta 92 was one of the most capable pistols in the test, but bureaucratic concerns and outdated preferences held it back. Even though the FBI didn't give it the recognition it deserved, the 92 went on to become an iconic sidearm used by military and law enforcement agencies worldwide. SIG P226, the almost perfect choice. The SIG P226 was one of the strongest contenders in the FBI's 1987 pistol trials. This 9mm handgun was already gaining a reputation for its exceptional accuracy, reliability, and smooth trigger pull. It had performed remarkably well in the U.S. military's XM9 trials, only losing to the Beretta 92 due to cost considerations. During the FBI tests, the P226 excelled in both reliability and accuracy. It was one of the most dependable pistols in the lineup, handling thousands of rounds without significant malfunctions. Its double-action, single-action DASA trigger system was well-balanced, offering a smooth initial pull and a crisp follow-up shot. The high-capacity magazine 15 rounds was another strong selling point, giving agents more firepower compared to some of the competition. However, the SIG P226 had a few drawbacks that held it back. One issue was its larger grip size, which wasn't ideal for every shooter. Additionally, the FBI had concerns about its cost, as SIG firearms tend to be more expensive than other service pistols. While these factors didn't affect performance, they played a role in the FBI's final decision. In hindsight, the SIG P226 was easily one of the best pistols in the trials, and many would argue it should have been selected. While the FBI ultimately chose other options, the P226 went on to become a favorite among elite military and law enforcement units worldwide, including the Navy SEALs. It remains a legendary handgun with a well-earned reputation for reliability and performance. Glock 17, the real winner. Among all the pistols tested by the FBI in 1987, the Glock 17 stood out as a true game-changer. While it wasn't officially selected, it proved itself superior in many ways, and in hindsight, it was the real winner of the trials. At the time, many traditionalists were skeptical of the Glock's polymer frame, but what seemed like a risky innovation turned out to be one of its biggest advantages. The Glock 17 was significantly lighter than its metal frame competitors, making it easier to carry for extended periods. Despite its lightweight build, it was incredibly durable and could withstand extreme conditions without failure. When it came to reliability, the Glock 17 was nearly flawless. It functioned in dirt, mud, and sand, cycling through thousands of rounds without stoppages. The safe action trigger system provided a consistent pull every time, making it easy to use under stress. With a 17-round magazine, it offered higher capacity than most competitors, giving agents more firepower in a fight. Another major advantage was simplicity. The Glock 17 had fewer parts than most traditional handguns, which meant fewer things could go wrong. It was easy to clean, easy to maintain, and easy to train with. Compared to some of the more complicated DASA pistols, the Glock's point-and-shoot operation was a breath of fresh air. So why didn't the FBI choose it? At the time, Glock was still a newcomer in the United States market, and the idea of a plastic-frame gun was hard for some decision-makers to accept. But history tells a different story. Over the years, Glock handguns became the dominant choice for law enforcement agencies worldwide, including the FBI itself. Looking back, the Glock 17 was the real winner of the 1987 trials. It may not have been picked at the time, but it set the standard for modern duty pistols, proving that sometimes the best choice isn't the one that gets chosen. At least, not right away. Looking back at the FBI's 1987 handgun trials, it's clear that the testing process was flawed in some ways, but it also provided valuable insights into what makes a great duty pistol. The Smith & Wesson 645 may have been the official choice, but history has shown that other contenders, like the Glock 17 and SIG P226, were the true standouts. The test highlighted key factors that remain relevant today: reliability, accuracy, magazine capacity, and ease of use. Some pistols performed well on paper, but failed in real-world conditions. Others, like the Glock 17, were ahead of their time and later became industry standards. In the end, the FBI's decision wasn't just about performance. It was influenced by bureaucratic processes, familiarity, and resistance to change. But time has a way of revealing the truth. The handguns that truly excelled in the 1987 trials went on to become legendary in law enforcement and civilian use. So, what's the takeaway? The best gun isn't always the one that gets picked first. Sometimes it's the one that stands the test of time.